Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of my Genealogy Live interviews. We're getting through, and I've had some fabulous guests. And today, by no means the end of them. So, today I have genealogy speaker and author of Ethical Dilemmas in Genealogy and The Psychology of Searching. I hope I got the second one right. And just all around lovely genealogist, Dr. Penny Walters.
Mm.
So, hello, Penny.
Hi, Daniel. I've been really looking forward
How are
to this,
you?
so this is very exciting for me. Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a new experience. I mean, not obviously not everyone might necessarily be used to this setting, but I mean, it's kind of good to push yourself out of kind of your comfort zone, especially in these things. Um,
so how
so,
how did you start with this setup? Because you've got your live interviews. How did you start? It's really exciting.
oh, well, I mean, I guess it was kind of, I mean, a lot of people kind of probably may have wanted like some entertainment or something, on a Friday night or Saturday night to watch it. There's nothing doing on Netflix, but they wanted something genealogy themed. So, I
Yeah,
mean, I like these kind of things, so I figured why not do my own? And I did one series, and a lot of people seem to like them, so I've just continued on. And so on the 26th of June will be my last one of the series, and I really need to kind of work on getting them into the audio versions. So people can listen to them as audio. They don't necessarily want to watch the whole video footage. So there's that as well, and that takes enough work to do. So I mean, yeah, I think it's just quite fun to do. Like I kind of thought, oh
yeah,
my god, it's gonna be like so much setting up and publicizing to do, but like there is that. But I mean, it's quite fun.
yeah.
More fun than I thought it would be.
I think with lockdown as well, everybody's got quite lonely at home. So
Yeah,
um, this is a really nice opportunity to have a discussion. I really miss the discussions that you would have in conferences or
yeah,
speaking engagements. So the chatting's really nice. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And I mean, hopefully, COVID is we're hopefully through the worst of it now. I hope. So hopefully, normality will slowly. Sorry, yeah, normality will eventually slowly start coming back
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah.
And even if there still have to be some changes. I mean, if we can actually go somewhere and in relatively good surroundings, I mean, I'd be quite happy. It's just gotten to that point where it's just like, please let us get out of the house. Too confined. Oh, and I mean, has it kind of affected you? Kind of the kind of lockdown has it kind of affected a lot of the stuff that you typically do?
Well, I'm a university lecturer by day, and the genealogy speaking was just ad hoc. And what I would try and do is kill a couple of birds with one stone. So I'd be asked to give a talk in blah blah city, and then I'd travel, see if I had any friends that were there, and I could meet them for lunch, and then have a look at the archives, go to the cathedral, or go along the waterfront or something. So um, in that sense, the mini breaks have all kind of gone now. So I
Yeah,
am looking forward to doing that again, because the genealogy lecturing takes me all over the UK and America, um, and potentially Australia. So obviously just sitting in my lounge doing Zooms hasn't been quite the same. So it's really
mm,
been nice to connect with people. And also, I'm finding that a lot of family history societies who have got people that are interested in that specific area are now having maybe a third more people listening to the Zooms. So they
mm,
couldn't physically go before. So there's been some swings and roundabouts, really. So, yeah, all my university lectures have gone online, and all my tutorials have gone online. So I had to hit the ground running with working out, like you said, the recordings, and people going into breakout rooms and discussions and online exams. So it's been quite challenging in that sense. But yeah, everything seems to have worked quite smoothly, really, with the online stuff. And I think that we're going to end up with a blended learning situation. Many of the family history societies that I would normally physically go to have said that they might either do 2 slots a month, one in person and one online, or alternate, because they've got international people wanting to join that group, So yeah, it's definitely had its advantages and disadvantages, but the camaraderie and the networking and the chatting, me with my gift of the gab, I do really like to be chatting to people. So yeah.
Fair enough. So I think we should get started. So what got you into genealogy first? What started it all off?
I don't know if there was a specific time or place that I can recall, but I'm adopted. So I've known since I was really very small that I was adopted. And my parents explained to me one day that they'd got me from somewhere and that I was the prettiest one and that they had chosen me. So so that was really nice. So I grew up with a really nice sense of identity that my parents had chosen me, that I was the prettiest one, and that they had literally fallen in love with me. So I was always treated like an absolute princess. But the flip side to that is that when you're the chosen one, you do have to, you know, stand up to all the expectations. And it was only as a teenager that I realized that you don't get babies, you make one, So I then, as a teenager, started thinking, well, where did they get me from? Is it a supermarket kind of place, or where do you get babies from? And actually you don't get them. So this had all been a bit of a romantic story that I'd had, although it got me out the house every morning thinking that I'm chosen. It was really nice. But obviously I was an only child, and sometimes people are on adoption lists for many, many years, and therefore biologically, my parents were probably elderly by the time they got me. So I didn't have any siblings. They were probably nearer to grandparent age. So anyway, after I had my first baby and I was laying on the hospital bed, screaming in pain and shattered and looking at this little creature thinking, oh my days, she's got these lovely little eyelashes and these lovely little fingers. And she was just this perfect person. Anyway, so while I was 25 and laying on a hospital bed, she was my first relative. I'd never met a relative before that. So literally, my baby was my first biological relative. So in those hours, I was looking at this beautiful, beautiful baby, which the photos don't always bear this out, but she was perfect in my eyes. And then I started thinking, did somebody also lay on a hospital bed thinking that I was beautiful and that I'd got a little nose and little fingers and pretty eyelashes? So I became intrigued about my biological parents after I had my first child. But I'd always had a very happy upbringing, been treated like a princess. So one of the problems when you're adopted is that you feel ungrateful if you start looking for biological family. And if I ever did mention to my parents about my adoption, my mum would look broken. So I never pursued it. So in that sense, to answer your question, the trigger eventually for me looking for biological parents and starting to have to make notes and get birth, marriage and death certificates was me giving birth to my daughter, because my daughter, when I was 25 was my first relative in the world. My parents had lots and lots of photos. My mum was one of those people that would put photos up to the light and put a little dot on it, and you'd have the name and the street and the date, and a mine of information. So when they passed away, that family tree was quite easy to compile back a few generations, because my mum was the person that kept the photos, had original, literally 1840s and 50s births, deaths, and marriage certificates. So that tree was really easy to compile. So the research started when I wanted to fill in my biological tree. So that was the trigger for starting my genealogy. And the massive trigger, because I started to lose interest because I didn't really know what I was doing. But the big trigger was I was giving a talk at Who Do You Think You Are years ago about being adopted, and they had DNA tests for sale. So I didn't understand DNA testing. I thought it was paternity testing. I didn't completely understand at the time. Anyway, so the lady on the stall or the booth was really nice, and I had my credit card with me. So I got a DNA test. And when it came back, firstly, I didn't understand any of the information. But the bit of information that I did understand was that I was 72% Irish. So I was so excited because I've been Mrs. English all these years. So yeah, 72% Irish. So I started running around telling everybody, I'm Irish, I'm Irish, how exciting. Because as I was growing up, people used to say, where are you from? Because I've got beige skin, brown hair, and very blue eyes, which retrospectively, that's the south of Ireland look, but I didn't know this. So I used to think, oh, well, I still don't know, I'm adopted. So yeah, the brown hair, blue eyes, and the beige skin is the south of Ireland. Anyway, so as soon as I got my DNA test results back, which said 72% Irish, my eldest daughter, my first biological relative, remember, said, will I be half of your Irish? And they've got a Jamaican grandfather, those children. So my daughter said, you've got a DNA test which says 72% Irish, the rest was Iberian Peninsula and Wales. So my daughter said, if I do a DNA test, will I be half of your Irish and half of your Welsh, and will it show how Jamaican I am? So I said, well, you're mixing me up for somebody that knows what they're on about. I don't know. So I paid for a DNA test for her, and then before the DNA test results came back, my granddaughter said, because she's mixed race, I've got Chinese eyes. Do you think I've got some Chinese in me? So I said, I just don't know. Let's wait and see. So I then paid for her to do a DNA test. So they overlapped a little bit. Anyway, when my daughter's DNA test came back, she had more Irish in her than would have been expected to be half of me. But the Jamaican came back as Nigerian DNA. So this was quite traumatizing because her Jamaican grandfather, who has got all of the lovely Jamaican positivities about him, has got Nigerian DNA, which can only imply that he had an enslaved ancestor. So I started becoming absolutely intrigued with the notion of ethnicity and identity, because I felt after I jumped on an aeroplane and went to Ireland and was running around, I'm Irish, with my English accent. And people would be like, what is the matter with this woman? Anyway, so I suddenly felt Irish. And when I went to Ireland, I felt grounded. I felt at home. I looked like everybody. And then my children's DNA tests were revealing that their Jamaican grandfather had Nigerian DNA, which could only have been from an enslaved ancestor. So we started looking for these hidden people, because it was pointed out to me, because I couldn't understand, why did all these Irish people move to Wales? What were they doing? Loads of them moving from Ireland to Wales. And somebody said to me, Penny, they didn't move. It was the potato famine. They were fleeing Ireland. So I'm also very interested in diaspora. When you visit homelands, are you diaspora or are you a tourist? And can you inherit any trauma? Because I am now the descendant of people fleeing a famine. That's not small. And my children are the descendants of enslaved Africans. So I'm interested in trauma, and pride and shame being absorbed into our genealogy as well. Yeah. So the triggers were me being adopted, me having a baby, me doing a DNA test, finding Irish ethnicity, and my children's Jamaican heritage being Nigerian ethnicity.
Fair enough. And I mean, you probably, I mean, I hope you really weren't like running around Ireland just suddenly you're like, I'm Irish, just kind of running around.
I was.
Just running around like Cork City or something, just go like, I'm Irish, and everyone's like, hey, moving on.
Yeah, no, I did. But through collaborating with a second cousin who I've obviously never heard of before, it appears that my Irish ancestors, who came from Drimoleague, which is in the southwest of Cork near Bantry, it appears that 8 girls went to America as domestic servants, and the 2 boys went to work in South Wales coal mines. So this elderly man in America, his grandfather had compiled a tree with his grandfather in. So the elderly man that I was collaborating with in America, the elderly DNA match, he had a 4-layer tree, and he gave me the address because his grandfather had included his grandfather and the address in Drimoleague. So when I flew immediately to Cork, and through some serendipity, outside of the, I was giving a lecture at the university in Cork, and right outside was a bus which went to Drimoleague. So I walked 6 inches to the bus, got on, got off. When I got to Drimoleague, I had been chatting with the bus driver on the 40-minute journey, and he stopped the bus, and it was like an old coach, and he said to everybody on the coach, I'm just taking this lady to the post office. So nobody seems to mind. In England, we'd be furious. So he got off the coach, took me to the post office, and said to the lady, this woman is lovely. Can you give her as much information as possible about Drimoleague, and can you show her your ancestor's house? So I thought, this is all nuts. So he jumped back on the bus and off he went, on the coach. So I'm just standing in the post office thinking, what are you playing at? Anyway, she made a phone call. So I think she's obviously ringing the police because I'm crazy. So she rang the oldest man in the village, who came and picked me up and drove me around all day at about 1 mile an hour. He was really an elderly chap. Anyway, he rang his wife and asked if I could come for tea. And they made me the most beautiful, beautiful buffet. We poked around in my ancestor's house, which is dilapidated now. And I had the most wonderful time. And yeah, so that was my wonderful story from there. And then I was sitting on the doorstep thinking, wow, look at the view. It's just fields and hills and the biggest cows I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, but while I was sitting on the doorstep, I thought, you can't feed children on a view. So the last time my ancestor sat on the doorstep, it was fleeing a famine. So it really affected me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, like so many people were affected by the famine, and I mean, if you were like tracing ancestors, like in the 1850s or late 1840s, early 1850s, if it's kind of oh, they were baptized in 1850, but they may not have survived. So, and obviously in that time, so like people would have been, if they were dead, they would have been buried in like mass graves or something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, in Drimmer League, the oldest man in the village that came and took me out for the day, took me to the graveyard. Now, he lives on top of the hill and is a dairy farmer. And my ancestors lived at the bottom of the hill and were farm workers, ag labs. So when he took me to the graveyard, he immediately took me to my ancestors' gravestone because they were the workers of his ancestors. So it's only a little hill. It's not, like a mountain, but basically he lived at the top of the hill, and as a child would play with the children at the bottom of the hill. But his dad was the employer of the family at the bottom of the hill, and his parents. So through the generations, this was a very famous, lucrative, rich dairy farmer. And my family were at the bottom of the hill doing the ag lab things. But he took me to the graveyard in Drimmerleague, explicitly pointed out the gravestone, and we walked past the famine pit. And basically, people were just literally put into the pit because people didn't obviously have any money, any energy. People were collapsing all over the place and literally starving to death. So I was quite traumatized with that as well. But I went to the Skibbereen Heritage Centre, which was fantastic. Have you been to the Skibbereen Heritage Centre?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, that was where there was a soup kitchen. I saw the pot, which was about the size of half of a front door, about the size of a small child, anyway, about the size of half of a front door. And they'd put the ingredients in the Heritage Centre as to what would have been in this soup pot. And I think it was like 99% water, I think one onion, one bone, one carrot, oh, yeah, your heart is bleeding when you go to these places, but really not far. I think, well, too far for me to walk, maybe 12 miles, and a hideous walk for people that are starving, obviously. But in a car today, not far at all, is the Skibbereen Heritage Centre. And they've got a living museum, and they've got some genealogists that will help people with their tree there. And one of the managers, or maybe two of the managers, have written a book called The Famine Story. So they showed me around for the afternoon. That was very interesting. So yeah, so that was a useful thing to do.
Fair enough. Uh, what resources have you found most helpful in your research?
Well, I had to start from scratch with the Irish research because my biological mother was from Wales, but my parents were from Wales. So I always felt as though I knew a lot about Wales. Ireland was a massive shock to me because I'd never even been there. In all my life, I'd never been to Ireland. And to find 74% Irish was not small. So the Irish records, I have had to go to Dublin, as I said, the Skibbereen Heritage Centre, the the rumor or the general idea is that many of the records, or at least the censuses, were destroyed in fires. So unless you are diligent, you might feel a bit disillusioned with having to do Irish research, but there are a lot of lateral thinking things that you can do. And what I have found to be the biggest mine of information, if anybody listening today is able to, is to actually go to where your ancestors came from. Because, as I say, going to my ancestors' ancestral home, because an American had given me the address, I was able to sit on the doorstep as my ancestors had done. I was able to look at the view, feel the rain on my skin, go to Skibbereen, to the Heritage Centre. I also went to Cove, where the ships went to America. You can hear spirits, you can hear voices, you can get deja vu. You may or may not believe in these things, and I generally don't. But the the deja vu and the serendipity that you get when you're in your ancestral home is just amazing. So yeah, so I think that not necessarily records in America, in Ireland, but going and meeting local people and retracing your ancestors' steps is very, very useful. And then for the oldest man in the village who came to pick me up, to be the child of the dairy farmer that employed my family, you couldn't get that in a record. So in that sense, going and meeting him and him telling me that while they were dairy farmers, my ancestor would, because there was at one stage there was a railway that went from Cork to Kerry apparently, and it would stop at Drimoleague, and my ancestor had apparently a little three-legged stool, and the train didn't literally stop. Apparently it would slow right down, and he had a little stool, and then he would help ladies get off the train, and they would give him a couple of pence or whatever it was at the time. So this elderly man who lived at the top of the hill from my ancestor basically gave me that story. And he also said, I think that one of your ancestors married a girl from over that hill. So I said, what hill? All I could see was hills, through the rain. So all I could see was green fields, hills, and the biggest cows I've ever seen in my life. So I said, what hill? So in his Irish accent, he said the word Clashduff. So, but in an Irish accent. So I said the truth. I didn't catch what you said. Could you write it down for me? When he wrote it down and pronounced it again a couple of times, the enumerator in South Wales had listened and spelt Clashduff, Clashdduff, which bears no resemblance to the Gaelic way of spelling it. So I have never been able to find Clashduff on a map. But when this man gave me the Gaelic pronunciation and the Gaelic spelling, I was then able to immediately locate it on a map, immediately look for a marriage record, immediately add another branch to the tree. So in Ireland, the on-the-ground work is invaluable.
Definitely. And when I'm eventually able to travel, I will be heading up to Mayo, especially to kind of where my people are from, and hopefully get some of that local knowledge, as you say.
Yeah, it's invaluable.
Hopefully go everything. Yeah. So what projects or ventures are you currently pursuing?
Okay, well, I'm a lecturer, so I don't have projects in that sense. So I don't do trees as a job. My driving me crazy project is, but I'm loving it, is that because I've neglected to research my Wales, my Welsh side, because my parents were Welsh and my biological mother was Welsh. So the Irish was intriguing and has been for many years. So recently I've refocused my interest in my biological tree, because I have got a good percentage of Welsh DNA as well. So, what I have discovered recently is that I have got about 10 DNA matches who match me on chromosome 19. And it's killing all of us, because in South Wales, they only seem to have had about 6 names and about 6 surnames. So every single person, every Davis has married a Williams, and every Williams has married an Evans, and every Evans has married a Davis. So me and about 10 people, but specifically one, are pulling our hair out as to how we can get our trees to coordinate with this thing. So we're calling it the chromosome 19 conundrum. And I'm a big lover of crosswords and Sudoku and Candy Crush. Don't tell anybody, Daniel. But this chromosome 19 conundrum, I think it might be trying to kill me. So basically, what I've discovered is that about 10 people match me on chromosome 19. They are all from the same village that my biological mother came from, and found religion and went to Utah with the LDS as Mormons. So all of my connections are in Utah and are Mormon, but came from the same little village that my biological mother was from, but we can't locate. Somebody must have married somebody, or somebody must have got in a bit of a pickle with somebody. But the intriguing thing is that family's surname is Walters. So you've introduced me tonight, Daniel, as Penny Walters, but biologically, I'm not a Walters. So all of these chromosome 19 matches are Walters. But a Walters has obviously married a Davis, or a Davis has married a Williams or something. Anyway, we've got people living a few streets away, but not married, or any evidence of somebody being a couple. So we are trying to slot me into their tree and them into my tree. But this Mormon Walters line is a very well established Mormon preacher's line. So it would be, I'm trying to write a new lecture about, I've already written one lecture which is called Why Did the Welsh Leave Wales? So why did Welsh people go to America? So for some it was they were pursuing their religion. For some, they were building railways. Some were mining. This kind of thing. So, in that sense, there's an established trail as to why many Welsh people struggling in coal mines were going to America. But I need to slot myself into that branch. So that would be very, very interesting. So that's the research I'm doing at the moment, Daniel, with my new DNA match, Bruce Walters. So he is a Walters and I'm not. So we've been giggling over that.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been kind of weird when you kind of discovered, oh, you look familiar. Just kind of seeing your name pop up. Well, your married name pop up again.
Yeah, he'd assumed obviously that I'm a Walters, but biologically I'm not. You see, so
Yeah.
we got chatting, and then I said I'd really like to crack this nut. So that's we're calling it the chromosome 19 conundrum. So yep.
Fair enough. Catchy. So, is there anything you now know that you wish you knew when you started?
Yes, I really wished that I knew about the impact of politics, history, and geography. What I had never understood was that people didn't live in isolation. So you were born and you may well have got married and you will have obviously died. But in the middle of people being born, maybe getting married and dying and having babies, obviously, is a political situation or history. Or so, for example, I've already said I couldn't understand why my Irish ancestors were moving to Wales, but I didn't understand that they didn't move; they were fleeing the famine. Um, I wouldn't know why were Nigerian people working in Jamaica. Well, they weren't working in Jamaica. They didn't fly to Jamaica and decide to stay and work. They were enslaved. And there's a hideous story behind that. So, my wish when I was younger would be that I understood the impact of politics, history, economics, and very definitely, and something that I do love is maps. Um, and I think that so whenever I do my tree research, I have maps open, physical maps and online maps as well, because you can't go anywhere. Do you like the joke? You can't go anywhere without a map, Daniel. So yeah, so when I'm looking at 1850s maps, some of which in South Wales bear no resemblance to today, because
Hmm.
South Wales looked like Ireland. It was beautiful hills and fields and rivers and estuaries and village folk. And then mining and tin and copper were found. And even the fact that there was an estuary which led into the sea, it affected shipping. So, in that sense, why did so many people start making businesses in South Wales? Why did they all go there? You know, and you think, well, it was coal mining, tin and copper. Oh, I see. So you can't
Hmm.
go anywhere without this background knowledge. You're fighting a losing battle if you research your ancestors in a vacuum, which is what I did originally. I just ordered birth, marriage, and death certificates and added births, marriages, and death dates to my tree. I hadn't understood the impact of social history.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's probably something that some might forget to do is kind of add it into context of history. Like you said, you didn't know why so many Irish people had left Ireland and why, and you didn't know kind of why did so many Welsh people leave, that sort of thing. So yeah, I
Yep.
think social history does bring a lot of stuff into context in some cases. So what aspect of genealogy do you love the most? So, like finding old photos, seeing records, finding mentions of ancestors in newspapers, telling stories, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm adopted, and whilst I've had a lovely childhood and teenage life, um, finding biological ancestors and doing a DNA test and connecting with biological relatives, not, ridiculously distant, like 10th cousin 24 times removed, but I am in cahoots with second and third cousins biologically. So my greatest joy in doing my genealogy work has been my sense of identity, because when you're adopted, you don't know what your ethnicity is, you don't know what your heritage is, you don't know who your biological parents are, you don't know about any medical illnesses, you don't know about any predispositions. You don't know why you've got those ears. You don't know why you do or don't like Marmite. You don't know why you've got blue eyes. You don't know anything. So for an adopted person, for me to connect with biological relatives has been a real great joy. For me to put all my ancestors on my tree has deeply affected me. And I'm really enjoying this new Irishness. And going to Cork and Kerry, I thought I was going to faint in Kerry. And I was driving around in Kerry. And I felt really faint, Daniel. I had to stop the car. I felt really ill. I got out the car. I had all little hairs on my arm. I couldn't catch my breath. And I thought, I'm going to get a migraine or something bizarre was happening. Anyway, I could hear water. So I thought, let me follow the water because water's always nice and relaxing. Sounded like a waterfall. I thought that would sound pretty. Anyway, so I parked the car, wandered over to where I could hear the water, and there was a waterfall. And I took some photos, and it was this little inlet. Anyway, it was beautiful. So on my mobile, it tells you where your photo was taken. Wandered round Kerry. When I got back home, I found that this faintness was in Sneem. And you could argue that there was some serendipity there, because when I researched Sneem, because I was thinking, I'm sure, I don't know if I was ill or got deja vu. When I researched it, that was where my ancestors worked on an oyster farm. So I'd been pulled into that inlet, that estuary, that it was just loads of trees, but I could hear water. So anyway, so the Irish pull is very, very intriguing. And I think that a lot of people that are diaspora from a variety of countries do feel as though they've got homelands, and that you shouldn't necessarily be where you are. So I haven't got any biological connectiveness with where I live, but when I go to Ireland, I find it really, really rewarding. Yeah.
That's nice. Kind of, it almost. I like the kind of like spiritual sense you kind of added to that. Kind of thinking, right? Well, this is actually where, my ancestors were. They worked on an oyster farm, probably not far from here. That sort of thing. And
yep.
Don't take it as sort of like a mean. That's sort of like I laughed. I genuinely thought it was just like some bad thing. Kind of thinking, oh, kind of thing. Don't take it like that. But like, I wouldn't have thought that would have been like the first thing that would have happened. But I mean, things work in mysterious ways.
Well, a lot of genealogists have told me that they've gone to a graveyard, been searching all day for one or two ancestors, got really fed up, and then they've lost their dog and they've thought, oh, it's just getting even worse. And then they found the dog sitting on their ancestor's grave, or they've walked out of the graveyard and whacked their toe and, oh, I've hurt my toe, look down and it's the correct name. Or suddenly there's a stranger wandering around the graveyard, and then you've said, sorry, I've come to look for my ancestors' graves, but I can't find the exit. You get chatting to this strange person, and it turns out it's your third cousin who's lived there all their life or something. But I reckon about 75% of the genealogists that I've spoken to have given me these quirky stories about some kind of serendipity when they are researching. One person even told me that she was in the Family Search Library in Salt Lake City, and they've got little, not corridors, sections between the library. So she had to brush past somebody. As she brushed past somebody, she whacked a book off the shelf. Also, went to pick up the book. It was one that had got her family tree in it. It was a book written by one of her ancestors that had whacked her in the family search library. So I've heard that from
Wow.
three people now, that they've had a book fall on them in the family search library. So
Right.
yeah, very interesting.
Well, it sounds like I'm going to have to walk in a few libraries
You need to
now
walk around some libraries, go to a graveyard,
before I get
look
whacked
for
by books now.
strangers.
I'm like, oh, there's my offices, right? There's me Whelan's. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I mean, I don't think that's ever happened to me. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure if I kind of felt, the spiritual thing that you had, that kind of,
Yeah,
kind of thinking, oh, well, this is where my ancestors were. But it might just be a case of I'm not looking or I'm in the right places yet. I don't know. Who knows?
yeah. But something that's of interest to you as a young genealogist, maybe your parents and grandparents are alive and you still feel quite embedded in the family.
Mm,
So I think that for many people, because I know one of your interests is encouraging youngsters to get
mm,
interested in genealogy. I think that sometimes genealogy is a middle aged, if not elderly, hobby.
mm.
So some of these quirkisms or serendipity or coincidences or spirits or even nonsense might be happening as you get older, you see.
Yeah, maybe. You never know.
You wait. You wait 40 years when you're wandering around a graveyard and you whack your toe.
Well, it could happen. You never know.
You'll
Uh,
remember me then. Next time you're in a library and a book falls on your head, that penny
yeah,
mentioned this.
it's
Hmm.
happened. Yay. Uh,
I've
yeah.
arrived. Hmm.
So, what's an interesting story or event that you've discovered about your ancestors?
I think I've told you about a million, Daniel.
Yeah, I know, I
um,
know. I can move on if you don't have
yeah,
any more to tell.
yeah. The 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 quirkiest thing is that my biological parents came from the same place as my adopted parents. So that's been the biggest and quirkiest thing, because I was adopted in London, so they should never have met. So, very interestingly, they both moved 35 years apart from the same place to London. So, that's the quirkiest thing that I have
Mm,
found.
wow. Question just came in from Yatunde. I hope I pronounced that right. I am interested in Penny's two books. Where can I get them?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, by sheer coincidence, they're behind me on the shelf. So, one is called Ethical Dilemmas in Genealogy, and that is covering all of the things that can go right or wrong, or we're having dilemmas about in our trees. And the other one is called The Psychology of Searching. So that book is asking you, why are you doing a tree? Is it for your identity? Is it to keep a record? And they are both available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, and therefore they're available internationally. Yeah. Thank you, Yatunde.
So, what type of record do you like most and why?
Um, yeah, I haven't got specific records that I like. I like the traveling. So the records give you some kind of evidence. But for me, as a spiritual person and a psychology and a philosophy kind of person,
Hmm.
to be honest, Daniel, I've got a bit fed up now with birth, deaths, and marriage certificates, and I want meat on the bones.
Hmm.
So I'm not a big, um, desperately looking for records in the archives kind of person. I
Hmm.
like to go and walk in their shoes and to feel the history and this kind of thing.
Fair enough. So, I'm getting near the end of my questions. So, if anyone watching wants to get any questions in for Penny, please do so now if you haven't already. So, what advice would you give to a young person starting out in genealogy?
Um, I think to ask questions and to file your information. I was traumatized recently after getting a couple of marriage certificates back. When I went to file them, because I had one of those, come on, Penny, like it was filing Friday or something, and I, in lockdown, have been trying to declutter. So part of decluttering has been filing. Anyway, so it was filing Friday. And I'll be honest with you, look, yeah, so look, all of these birth, marriage, and death certificates, which, look, they need to be next to the right person. Anyway, it's taken me a day and there's still about 40 in here. So my advice to a young person starting out, and I'm a hypocrite, would be get organized. So if it's at all possible, have separate wallets. So I have got, by my right hip, everybody has got a plastic wallet. And something that may be of interest is that because I'm adopted, I can't remember who people are. So I've started putting stick-it notes on. So I've got this person's marriage certificate, but I can't 100% remember who they are. So I've got a stick-it note with my pedigree. And then I've got somebody else who I've paid for a marriage or a birth certificate, can't remember who they are. So I've done a pedigree chart. And at the beginning of each branch, I print out my pedigree. So I print out my pedigree, blah, 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 blah. And then in here, each person has got a page and each person has got a stick-it note. So I'm the last person. It basically, So
Yeah.
this is, and this is going to be turned into a lecture soon as well. So basically, get organized and do filing. And something else that I've been doing is, I'm not sure if you can do it apart from in the Salt Lake City Family Search Library. I had the biggest chart I've ever seen in my life printed in a fan chart. It's as big as my car bonnet. So I don't know how they printed it. It must be A1 million or something. Anyway, so basically it's got me and then my fan chart. And I am now color coding who I've got birth, marriage, and death certificates for, and who lived where. And I've got different colors for different surnames, because we do have to remember that in South Wales, there are only about 6 surnames. So it feels like Davis is marrying Williams, who's married Evans, who's married Walters, but they're all different branches. And you think, did they know these people? No, they've lived miles away. So anyway, yeah. So the advice, Daniel, is get organized and file. Don't shove everything in a carrier bag.
I don't think any genealogist who saw that saw loads of records just chucked in a carrier bag. I think they kind of go like, right, you and me, file it now. Like any genealogist who wanted to walk into their home and just saw a load of certs, just in a carrier bag, and they're just kind of like, right, this is not what you do, and then they launch into just fixing it all. Just do like Sheldon Cooper, just fixing everything. Anyway, so with times changing and more young people getting into genealogy, do you, in your opinion, kind of think that there is a sufficient outlet for young people to express themselves and connect with others their own age?
Well, I hadn't thought of that until you triggered that question. So sometimes, because I see people talking about things that make me nervous or upset or embarrassed. So until you've walked in somebody's shoes for 5 minutes, you can't comment, you see. So while I'm adopted, I get asked some very personal questions. My children are Black British, so they have got a history that they have to own. So I have never thought, what is the slight difference between youngsters getting involved in genealogy and anybody else? So I'd be very interested to hear from you, Daniel, as to what you think is, why is it a niche? So why do you feel that this is a niche subject? So you must have felt some barriers, or you must have felt a bit different. So I hadn't thought of young genealogists before, but now you've mentioned it to me, it's in my mind now, but I'd prefer to hear from you.
Well, I mean, when I started it, it was all because of a funeral that I was coming back from. It was from a wake. And literally, it was like a 2.5 hour car journey home. So I was literally talking to my mother on the way home, kind of saying, "Oh, who was like granddad's mother's name, or like what was like
Yeah,
she
yeah.
didn't like she only knew like two of her
Bits.
grandparents' names. Like she didn't
Mm.
even like she knew her maternal side, but she didn't know her paternal side at all. So I mean, that was January, and my grandfather would pass away that May. So I was lucky to get a name out of kind of he was he was kind of glad I was kind of getting into it as far as I can remember, I think. And he just kind of said, Patrick Cleary and Kathleen Foley. And so that was kind of the names I worked off of, and then just kind of built it back and back and back. And I mean, I only have, sadly, I don't have any grandparents with me now. The last one passed in 2017. That was the last grandparent I had. I didn't even get to meet two of them, and another one died when I was like 1.5. So I only kind of really knew one, and I guess it was a case of um, like where do I come from? Because I know like every so often, like Dad would talk about his family either, let's say in England, or his parents being from Rosslevin or Kilchima in Mayo, um, and it would just be kind of like asking about that. And as I kind of got into it, I then kind of realized, it's not really, something that young people get into. Because like when I'd kind of say, "Oh, do you do this kind of thing? Do you do genealogy?" And the answer I'd always get is no. And I think it's just a case of, and when I kind of said this when I was talking with Johnny during his interview, kind of, if like young people don't really have a role model or something that they, or someone that is their own age, they don't necessarily have to know the person. But if they don't kind of see someone their own age like me kind of doing it, why would they do it? Because they probably think, oh, it's only for older folk or
Yeah.
someone. It's just, I mean, it's just kind of, I think the stereotype kind of gets in the way a little as well. Because, like I
Yes.
said, it's kind of, primarily, probably an older person's niche or subject. So young people mightn't necessarily do it. But, I mean, I'm me along with a number of other Gen Z genealogists and Gen Alpha or whatever the new generation after 2010 is called. Are hoping to, just kind of get rid of the stereotype that, so like, granted, I'm 17, I'm going to be 18. I'm not classing myself old. Like, it's just kind of in time, I will be old. So, I mean, it's just, kind of helping the next gen and just kind of, helping them get started. And also, that was another thing, because when I kind of started, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like
Yeah, yeah.
making a family tree, adding names to it, adding dates to it, adding photos. And then it was only kind of when a cousin of mine, sadly not with us anymore, told me about this site where you could look at um like birth, marriages and deaths for free. I thought that sounds right up my alley. and then get researching on that. And I found that a little bit hard to do because I didn't know how to use the site. And one of the blog posts which I really actually need to repost is kind of like a step by step on how to use it. Granted, some people may kind of think, "Oh, you don't need a step by step; it's simple." But I can assure you,
No,
I
I
didn't.
think it's useful. Yeah.
I mean, it'd be useful for like people who don't really know how to use it. And then I just kind of kept looking. But I mean, I'd say getting back on topic. I mean, I think it's just there aren't many people their own age doing it. So, and it's just a case of I've been mocked a little for liking it and for doing it. I'm not kidding. I have kind of just kind of thinking why, just kind of being asked why are you doing it, and one thing I actually just thought of now on the spot, and I really wish I knew. I kind of said then, kind of saying was why don't you? Because I
Mm,
mean,
mm.
if it's just a case of oh, there aren't any people my own age doing it, I'm not gonna. But I mean, I think it's just a whole. I think it's just two things, like the role model and the stereotype.
Right.
And I
So
think they kind of
in that
picked a lot.
sense, you're a trailblazer then, really. So you should carve your niche.
Hmm.
So one of my grandsons is interested. He's 8, um, but my children aren't. And I think that you often have a trigger, like you said, it was after a funeral. So for
Hmm.
me, it was the birth of my first child,
Hmm.
who was revealed to be my first relative. For
Hmm.
somebody else, it is a death or retirement or something. So in England, I can't remember what age it is. I think it might be 11 or 12. They have to do a family tree. But
Yeah.
if you've got fragmented families, it can cause problems, which
Hmm.
is why I think that ethical dilemmas in genealogy needs
Yeah.
to be taken far more seriously. Because if you've got blended families or step families or fragmented completely, um, doing a family tree can be really upsetting for an
Yeah.
11-year-old. It can be a great joy for somebody that is in a nuclear family, but I remember one of my children's teachers saying, "Why have you got a different surname to your mum?" It was just basic, silly Billy question, really. Anyway, so I think that in England, at about the age of 11 or 12, you have to do a project on Tutankhamun, and you also have to do a family tree. But if it's not handled sensitively,
Hmm.
you could really upset the average 11 or 12-year-old, I
Yeah.
think. But that's why I'm excited that you've carved this niche, Daniel, and I'm excited to see where you go and what you do, because you are a trailblazer now. So, yeah.
Oh dear. Well, I mean, I guess all I can say to that is, I mean, I've been called worse, so I'll take that.
Hmm.
I've been called much worse, so I'll take that.
Yeah.
So,
No,
uh,
if you've got
yeah,
that hat, wear it, you know?
yeah. And I think on that note, I think we shall end. So, thank you so
Okay.
much, Penny, for coming
Thank
on
you.
and being a fabulous guest and very entertaining.
Good.
Uh,
That's great.
I, I, I mean, the gift of the gab trait does live on
I'm the
in a
Irish
good
mammy, you
sense.
see.
In a good sense. Uh, no, and I mean, no, it was just fun to talk to you.
Brilliant.
And
Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. So, I've been wanting to have a chat with you for a while. So, this has been a great opportunity.
yeah,
And I'll put it on my social media so that people can listen to the interview on another occasion as well. So,
lovely.
brilliant. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very
And
much.
thanks
Thank you.
everyone for watching. So, we'll see it. Well, I'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
All right then.